If you're a real Warriors fan living in the US, this video is for you. From coast to coast, America is buzzing after last night's game. Steph Curry just reminded the whole country why he runs the West. If you've been following the NBA for a long time, you know that behind every championship banner and every highlight reel, there are untold stories. Some are inspiring, some are heartbreaking, and some are just flat out hilarious when you look back at them decades later. And today, we're diving into one of those stories, a moment that connects two basketball legends, Steve Kerr and Michael Jordan. A moment that started as a punch in practice, and years later has become one of the most talked about, and even joked about, events in NBA history. Yes, you heard that right. Steve Kerr recently admitted that he still feels bad for Michael Jordan, not because of anything MJ did on the court to an opponent, not because of a career decision, but because of that infamous practice fight where Jordan actually punched Kerr in the face. Now, on the surface, it sounds wild. How could the guy who got punched end up feeling bad for the guy who threw the punch? Well, stick around, because this story has layers of humor, history, and a reminder that sometimes the toughest battles aren't on the hardwood in front of millions of fans. They're in the practice gym where no cameras are rolling. Let's rewind the clock back to the mid-1990s. Michael Jordan had returned to the Chicago Bulls after his first retirement. The team was looking to recapture its dynasty form, and practices under head coach Phil Jackson were known for being intense. MJ, as competitive as anyone who's ever walked onto a basketball court, treated every scrimmage like Game 7 of the NBA Finals. And for new teammates, that meant either matching his fire or getting burned by it. Enter Steve Kerr. At the time, Kerr wasn't the head coach we know today, guiding the Golden State Warriors to multiple championships. He wasn't the calm, thoughtful voice breaking down strategy on TNT interviews. He was a role player, one of the best shooters in the league, but still a guy trying to carve out a role alongside the most dominant figure in the sport. And Kerr's competitive streak, though quieter, was there. He wasn't afraid to stand his ground. One day in practice, tempers flared. MJ, who had a reputation for riding his teammates hard, was pushing Kerr to the limit. Words were exchanged, intensity boiled over, and before anyone knew it, Jordan threw a punch that landed squarely on Kerr's face. Teammates rushed in, the practice was shaken, and the story would go on to live in NBA history as one of the most famous practice fights ever. Most players would probably hold a grudge forever. I mean, imagine your boss or your co-worker hauling off and hitting you during a work meeting. That's not the kind of thing you just shrug off. But Kerr? He handled it differently. He bounced back, literally, and instead of dividing them, the fight actually helped strengthen his relationship with Jordan. From that day forward, MJ respected Kerr for standing up to him. And that bond would later show itself in one of the biggest moments in NBA Finals history, Game 6 of the 1997 Finals, when Kerr hit the championship-winning shot off a pass from none other than Michael Jordan. Fast forward to now, decades later, and Steve Kerr can actually laugh about it. Recently, when asked about that fight and about MJ's role in it, Kerr hilariously flipped the script. Instead of painting himself as the victim, he said he actually feels bad for Jordan. Why? Because according to Kerr, Jordan has had to live with that reputation all these years, being known as the guy who punched his teammate in the face. Kerr joked that while he was the one who took the punch, it's Jordan who can't escape it whenever people bring up stories about his legendary career. Think about that for a second. Michael Jordan has 6 championships, 5 MVPs, 10 scoring titles, 2 Olympic gold medals, and an endless highlight reel that cements him as the greatest of all time in many people's eyes. And yet, when you talk to fans, one of the stories that always comes up is, "Hey, remember when MJ punched Steve Kerr?" It's become a punchline literally, and Kerr can't help but laugh at how history has immortalized it. What makes this even better is that Kerr himself has leaned into the humor of it. He doesn't talk about it with bitterness or anger. Instead, he uses it as an example of how competitive environments can sometimes boil over, but also how those moments can forge lasting respect. And Kerr, being the witty, self-deprecating guy he is, turns it into comedy by saying he's the one who should be remembered as the victim, but somehow it's MJ who carries the shame of it decades later. It's also worth pointing out the irony. Steve Kerr, who later became a coach known for his calm demeanor and emphasis on joy and togetherness, once took a literal punch from the most intense player in NBA history. That experience shaped him. He's even admitted before that learning how to handle MJ's fire made him stronger mentally. And as a coach, you can see the influence. He demands accountability, but he also knows when to balance it with encouragement. Maybe that balance comes from living through that moment in practice when things went too far. The internet, of course, has had a field day with this story over the years. Memes, jokes, and viral clips always resurface whenever Kerr or Jordan are in the spotlight. And Kerr's latest comment, about feeling bad for MJ, just adds another layer of humor for fans to run with. It's classic Kerr turning a potentially embarrassing memory into a story that makes everyone laugh and reminds us that even the greatest legends had human, messy, funny moments. But let's not forget the bigger picture here. That fight wasn't just about tempers flaring. It was a snapshot of the culture that Phil Jackson and the Bulls had at the time. That team thrived on competitiveness. Jordan pushed everyone, sometimes too far, but it was all about raising the standard. Kerr, in his own way, proved that he could meet that standard. And when you look at how the Bulls went on to win another three-peat, you realize that even moments like this one, yes, even the punches played a role in shaping their dynasty. There's also a deeper lesson in Kerr's joke. By saying he feels bad for Jordan, he's showing that sometimes our mistakes stick with us longer than they should. Jordan has been asked about that punch in countless interviews. It came up in the Last Dance documentary, where MJ himself admitted he regretted it. And while Kerr laughed about it, Jordan was visibly uncomfortable revisiting it. In other words, the guy who threw the punch has carried the weight of it, while the guy who got punched has moved on with humor and grace. That's a perspective that only time and a sense of humor can give you. So, where does that leave us today? Well, for fans, it leaves us with one of the NBA's most iconic behind-the-scenes stories. For Kerr, it leaves him with a scar in his memory that turned into comedy gold. And for Jordan, it's a reminder that even the greatest of all time had moments they wish they could take back. But thanks to Kerr's hilarious twist, we can all laugh about it together. To put it another way, Steve Kerr might have taken the punch, but decades later, he also delivered the punchline. And in the world of sports, where stories often get too serious, that's the kind of perspective we all need. So the next time you're watching highlights of MJ's dunks or Kerr's clutch three-pointers, remember that somewhere in the middle of those championships and celebrations, there was a day in practice where one legend punched another, and years later, the guy who got hit actually felt sorry for the guy who threw it. Only in the NBA could a story like that live forever. And honestly, when you think about it, maybe Kerr's right. Maybe it's Jordan who deserves the sympathy here, not for what he did, but for the fact that one moment of bad judgment has been frozen in time, replayed in documentaries, turned into memes, and joked about on podcasts. Kerr's cheeky humor reminds us that legends aren't just defined by their greatness. They're also defined by their flaws, their mistakes, and sometimes the funny way history remembers them. In the end, this story isn't really about a fight. It's about respect. It's about how two competitors can clash, reconcile, and then go on to win together. It's about how Kerr earned MJ's trust, and MJ trusted Kerr enough to pass him the ball for a finals winning shot. And it's about how, decades later, Kerr can smile and laugh at something that could have been ugly, but instead became part of NBA folklore. So, Steve Kerr hilariously feeling bad for Michael Jordan decades after getting punched? It's not just funny, it's a perfect example of how time can turn pain into perspective, and perspective into comedy.